The year was 1885. A studio photo showed a young boy in a wool suit sitting beside his little sister, who wore a white lace dress. He held her hand as if he was looking out for her. His face had the serious look families of that time called proper. She sat perfectly still with her eyes closed and her head slightly tilted, as if she were resting. For more than a century, the picture stayed in storage, labeled as a sweet Victorian portrait of two siblings. People saw it as gentle and charming. But in 2023, a museum curator scanned the photo at extremely high resolution and noticed something beneath the surface, hidden under the girl's dress and in the dark areas behind them. These details explained why she didn't move during the long exposure, why her skin looked unusual, and why the boy seemed so emotional. The picture wasn't what anyone believed it to be. The photo first appeared in an online estate auction in March 2023. It was listed as a portrait of Victorian children from around 1885, likely from the Boston area. It showed a boy of about 7 in a dark wool suit with a white collar, and a younger girl of about 4 in a fancy white dress with lace and ribbons. She wore a small bouquet pinned to her chest. Collectors were drawn to the photo because it looked gentle and heartfelt. The boy held the girl's hand tightly, but with care. His face was serious, as was common in that era, but his eyes looked protective. The girl's closed eyes and relaxed expression made her seem peaceful. The picture sold for $140 to the Boston Museum of Vernacular Photography, which focuses on everyday 19th century images. Dr. Eleanor Graves, the museum's chief curator, added it to a group of Victorian family photos scheduled for digital preservation. When Dr. Graves first looked at the print, she thought it was simply a touching portrait of an older brother and his shy little sister. The photo was a 6 by 9-inch cabinet card mounted on thick cardstock. The back showed a faded stamp reading Mitchell Portrait Studio, Boston, EST 1878. In April 2023, she began scanning it with a specialized high-resolution system that captured details far finer than the eye can see. She explained that this process often brings out hidden marks, repairs, fading, or even erased pencil notes. The first skin looked normal, but as she worked on restoring contrast and correcting age damage, odd details began to show. The lighting on the boy came from the left, creating natural shadows. The girl, however, had almost no shadow at all, and her face looked unusually flat, as if lit evenly from every direction. She also noticed faint streaks on the boy's cheeks that looked too natural to be simple damage. When she boosted the contrast behind them, she found a thin vertical line behind the girl, something that shouldn't appear in a typical studio backdrop. These details made her uneasy. Each one could have been nothing on its own, but together they suggested something was off. She then used spectral imaging, a method that reveals hidden layers using different types of light. What appeared shocked her. Beneath more than a century of retouching, the scan showed that this wasn't a normal portrait at all, and the girl wasn't who people thought. Spectral imaging works by photographing the same object under ultraviolet, infrared, and other control light sources. Different materials react in different ways, allowing hidden layers to show through, even ones invisible in regular lighting. When Dr. Graves viewed the photo with infrared light, the girl's face changed completely. In normal light, her skin looked pale but still natural for the time period, similar to many New England portraits of the 1800s. Under infrared, though, her face showed clear signs of paint. Someone had brushed over parts of the image right on the photograph itself. According to Dr. Graves, this wasn't the kind of decorative color people often added to old portraits. It looked like careful retouching done to hide details. Most of the painted areas were around the girl's mouth, nose, and along the edges of her face. Whoever did the work was skilled enough that none of it showed under regular lighting. But it raised a clear question. Why would anyone need to cover a child's face so heavily? When Dr. Graves zoomed in on the girl's lips and nose, she saw faint bluish-gray tones under the paint. These same tones had been carefully covered, but were still visible through the spectral scans. She asked medical consultant, Dr. Paul Chun, to review the enhanced images. He explained that the color pattern matched something called cyanosis, a bluish tint that shows when the body isn't getting enough oxygen. It most often appears around the lips, nose, and fingertips. When Dr. Graves asked what might cause that, Dr. Chun listed several possibilities. breathing problems, heart issues, cold exposure, and he paused. Also the absence of life. Dr. Graves looked back at the girl's hands, held by her brother. The same faint discoloration appeared near her fingernails, also covered by paint, but visible under advanced imaging. She then took a closer look at the vertical line she had spotted earlier behind the girl. After enhancing it, the shape became clear, a metal support running up behind her back and disappearing under the high collar of her dress. A support stand, she said quietly. It had been used to hold her upright. Zooming in around the girl's neck and shoulders revealed slight marks under the lace collar, small pressure lines that suggested something had been pressing against her skin. Dr. Graves checked the background again with infrared light and found the outline of a person standing behind the girl, covered in dark fabric that blended into the studio backdrop. She recognized the technique immediately. It was known as hidden mother photography, something photographers sometimes use when young children couldn't stay still for long exposures. An adult, often the mother, would hold the child while being covered in fabric, so they wouldn't appear clearly in the final print. But in this image, the girl wasn't moving at all. Dr. Graves then re-examined the boy's face. The faint streaks on his cheeks weren't from age or damage. When she increased the contrast, they appeared as clear tear lines. He had been crying during the portrait session, and at that moment, everything fit together. This wasn't a portrait of two children sitting for a family photo. It was a memorial picture. The girl was no longer alive. Dr. Graves sat with a restored image, thinking through everything it implied. In the Victorian era, loss was a common part of family life. Many children did not survive early illnesses in the 1880s, and families often faced serious health challenges. Photography, still a fairly new tool, became a way to keep one final image of someone who had passed away. These memorial photos were widely used at the time. Even though many modern viewers are unfamiliar with them, photographers used different methods to make the person look peaceful. They might position the body with support stands, place them beside family members, or add paint to soften pale features. The goal was to help families remember their loved one with care. But this particular image stood out to Dr. Graves. Most memorial portraits were clearly labeled or arranged in a way that made their purpose known. For example, the individual might be photographed alone or surrounded by flowers. Families in that era didn't try to cover up loss. They treated it as something to honor. But this photograph seemed made to hide its true purpose. The heavy retouching, the covered support stand, the edited background where an assisting adult had been, all of it suggested someone wanted the picture to look like a regular sibling portrait. Dr. Graves looked again at the physical print, this time studying the back under magnification. In one corner, she found faint pencil writing, nearly rubbed away over time. With enhanced lighting and digital tools, she made out the names, Clara and Julian, April 1885. Beneath it, in a different handwriting, she could barely see two words, last together. The phrase didn't sound like something written on an ordinary family photo. It suggested a final moment. She contacted the Boston City Archives and asked for death records from April 1885 that might match names found in the Mitchell studio logs. 3 days later, she received a document dated April 3rd, 1885. It recorded the passing of Clara Elizabeth Langford, age 4. The listed cause was scarlet fever. A cemetery record showed she was buried at Mount Auburn Cemetery on April 5th. Dr. Graves compared these dates with the studio's appointment books, which the Boston Historical Society had already digitized. On April 4th, 1885, one day after Clara died and one day before her burial, the studio noted a session titled Memorial Sitting, Langford Children, 2 exposures, $3. The photograph had been taken the day after Clara's death. Her family had brought her to the studio in a formal white dress, likely the same one chosen for her burial. She had been positioned upright with support rods, placed next to her brother, and photographed. Julian, who was 7 at the time, had sat beside his sister, holding her hand during the portrait. The streaks on his cheeks weren't from the difficulty of posing still. They were from crying. It had been his last moment with her. Someone, maybe the photographer, maybe the parents, had covered every sign of her condition, so the picture would look like a gentle sibling photo. For 138 years, the truth stayed hidden until the digital restoration brought out the layers beneath. Dr. Graves then grew curious about the boy's life. She searched census records and genealogy databases to learn what became of him. She found his full name, Julian Robert Langford, born November 12, 1877 in Boston, and passing away on March 3, 1956, at the age of 78. Julian lived through major events of the 20th century, including both World Wars and the Great Depression. Records showed he never married. He remained with his parents until they passed in the early 1920s, then continued to live in the same neighborhood where he grew up. His occupation appeared the same across decades: schoolteacher. Dr. Graves located a short obituary printed in the Boston Globe in March 1956. It described Julian as a retired elementary school teacher who passed away peacefully at home. He was remembered as a patient and caring educator. He had no spouse or children and was survived by cousins. His burial took place at Mount Auburn Cemetery, the same cemetery where Clara was laid to rest 71 years before. She checked the burial records next. Julian was placed in a Langford family plot alongside his parents, near a small marker reading Clara, beloved daughter, 1881 to 1885. But the detail that struck her most came from the Boston Public Schools archives. While searching for records from his teaching career, she found a school yearbook from 1938, when Julian was 61 and nearing retirement. His profile noted that he had taught at Adams Elementary for 37 years and was especially gentle with students who had experienced loss. It said he understood grief in a way many adults no longer remembered. Attached to the file was a small black and white photograph of Julian late in life, sitting at a classroom desk, surrounded by his students. On the wall behind Julian in the school photo, there was a framed picture that was hard to make out at first. When Dr. Graves enhanced the image, she realized it was the 1885 portrait of him and Clara. He had kept that picture in his classroom for many years. It was the same portrait taken when he was 7, sitting beside his sister, holding her hand as he cried. The same picture that had been retouched to look like a typical family photo. He displayed it openly, and no one ever knew its real meaning. Dr. Graves felt her eyes fill as she understood. Julian had carried the memory of his sister throughout his whole life. Through childhood, adulthood, and decades of teaching. He never married or had children of his own, but he dedicated his life to working with young students, especially those who were going through loss. He understood that kind of hurt because he experienced it early, sitting beside Clara during their final photograph, and he lived with that memory for more than 70 years. When he passed away in 1956, he was laid to rest beside Clara. After many decades, the siblings who had been photographed together one last time in 1885 were together again. Dr. Graves realized this was more than a technical discovery. It was a story about lasting love. She organized an exhibition at the Boston Museum of Vernacular Photography called Hidden Grief, Victoria Memorial Photography, and the Art of Concealment. The restored portrait of Clara and Julian was the centerpiece. Alongside it, she displayed the spectral scans showing the retouching, the support stand, and the faint outline of the adult figure in the background. The exhibit also included information about Victoria Memorial Photography, the high rates of childhood illness in the 1880s, and the customs families used to cope with loss. Dr. Graves included Julian's records too: census listings, his obituary, the school photos showing the portrait behind him, and the burial information showing that he and Clara were ultimately placed side by side. The exhibition opened in September 2023 and drew more visitors than anyone anticipated. Some were unsettled at first. A few parents shielded their children's eyes, unsure how to react to the idea of photographing someone after death. But many stayed, reading Julian's story, looking at his later life photo with a framed portrait behind him, and understanding how someone can carry love and loss throughout a lifetime. One visitor wrote in the guest book, "I expected this to feel frightening. Instead, it's the most moving thing I've seen." He never forgot her. He cared for her his whole life. The portrait spread widely online, sparking conversations about Victorian mourning traditions, childhood illness, and how different cultures approach loss. Some people questioned why Julian's parents would include him in a memorial photo, calling it too heavy for a child. Historians responded by explaining that families of that time saw these portraits as caring gestures, a way to save one last moment together when no other form of recording existed. They didn't have videos or everyday snapshots. Dr. Graves said in interviews, this was the only way to keep an image of their children together. After Clara's passing, Julian would be their only child. This was their final moment as siblings. Through genealogy research, Dr. Graves eventually located a living relative, Julian's great-great-niece, and Langford, age 76, living in Vermont, and new stories about Uncle Julian, the teacher who never married, but she had never heard about Clara. Family history only hinted that he once had a sister who died young after seeing the photograph, and said, seeing him as a child, holding her hand, crying, it explained so much about the person he became, and donated Julian's personal papers to the museum, including a small leather diary he kept in 1901. One entry dated April 3rd, 1901, the 16th anniversary of Clara's death, read, I'm 23 today, and Clara would have been 20. I think of her every day. The children I teach now are her age. I try to be patient and gentle, the way I wish someone had been with me when she died. Grief never leaves. You just learn to carry it with love instead of pain. The museum placed this diary entry next to the restored photograph. The final panel of the exhibit read, this photograph shows two children, one living and one gone. But on a deeper level, it shows what continues beyond loss. The bond between siblings, the weight of memory, and the choice to carry sorrow with kindness. Julian Langford held his sister's hand in April 1885. In many ways, he held on for the rest of his life. Victorian families didn't photograph loss out of fear or discomfort. They did it because love made them want to remember. And sometimes that love lasted a lifetime and beyond. The restored photograph of Clara and Julian ended up doing more than reveal hidden details from a long-ago studio session. It opened a window into how families once held on to each other during difficult times. What Dr. Graves uncovered was not simply a corrected image, but a record of how people tried to keep loved ones close when life fell uncertain. For the Langford family, the picture was a way to hold on to both of their children for one final moment. For Julian, it became something he carried with him into adulthood, into his work, and into every classroom where he tried to offer patience and comfort to children who needed it. The photograph reminded visitors that grief often stays quietly with us. It doesn't always fade. Sometimes it becomes something we learn to live with, and even something that guides us. Julian's life showed that clearly. He didn't talk about his loss in public, and he didn't start a family of his own, yet he spent nearly 4 decades helping young students feel understood. He gave them the kind of gentleness he once needed himself. In that way, his sister's memory shaped the person he became, long after the day they stood together for that portrait. The exhibition also asked visitors to see Victorian mourning customs in a new light. What can seem unusual today was, in their world, a loving attempt to remember. Families had very few ways to save images of the people they cared about. A single photograph could become the only visual record someone had. When Clara died, her parents chose to bring both children to the studio not out of fear or discomfort, but out of a wish to preserve the bond between them. The retouching, the hidden support, and the careful pose were all part of families' effort to hold on to something they knew they were about to lose. Many people who visited the exhibition said they expected to feel uneasy. Instead, they felt moved. They saw Julian not only as a boy in a portrait, but as a person who carried love forward. They saw Clara not as a symbol, but as a child whose short life still had meaning, because it shaped the brother who never forgot her. The story reached people online for the same reason. It reminded them that grief is universal, and that families in the past were not so different from families today. They wanted to remember, to honor, and to keep connection alive in whatever way they could. In the end, the photograph that had been hidden in an archive for more than a century became something far greater than an old studio print. It became a reminder that the bonds we form, even in childhood, can stay with us for a lifetime. It showed that memory can be both heavy and hopeful at the same time. And it offered a quiet truth, that when people choose to remember with care, love can continue long after the moment it was first captured. The Langfords' portrait was more than a record of two children. It was a testament to lasting connection, to the ways families hold on, and how one brief moment in 1885 continued to